Hello, Scooby-Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 2, Episode 6 review of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? So last time, as part of my 2023 Summer Special, we reviewed Season 2, Episode 5 of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Haunted House Hang-Up. Of course, as you guys know, there was a whole debacle with that, and, it ended up not being able to be uploaded on YouTube. So I had to upload it onto backup websites. So once again, I'm very sorry about that old situation, but you still can go see it. It's still up. It's still available. I talk about that situation and all that, but there wasn't really much to discuss. But yeah, but you can still go and check it out. The links are in the description of that video. And I talked about how that was a really good episode. So now today we'll be covering Season 2, Episode 6 of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You, titled "The Tiki Scare Is No Fair," which was released on October 17th, 1970. The short synopsis of the episode is Mystery Inc.'s vacation at Hawaii is interrupted by a witch doctor who warns both locals and tourists of the coming wrath of the god Mano Tiki Tia. So, as with all these videos, I will of course be watching this episode on the Scooby-Doo Where Are You Complete Series box set, which is a great box set, as I mentioned plenty of times before. Definitely recommend getting it. Now that we're close to the end, it'll be fun getting into the special features. We're 2 episodes away from the finale, of this series, and then we'll be able to dive in the special features of that, and I definitely will be getting the DVDs of the other Scooby-Doo shows to watch them and tackle those and look at those special features, because it'll be interesting to see the behind the scenes of each show, or at least of interesting tidbits. But anyway, so this is a special episode for me. I said this a little bit in my last review, but this is a nostalgic episode for me. This episode was my favorite growing up when I watched Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Whenever I watched a Season 2 episode, this was the one that I watched the most. In fact, I would argue it was probably the one of the Scooby-Doo, Where Are You episodes that I watched the most. I really had a fun time with this episode when I was younger, and I always enjoyed watching it. Now, when it comes to the Scooby-Doo community, I believe most fans seem to kind of like this episode, despite it not really getting a lot of discussion by fans. I mean, when it does get talked about by Scooby-Doo fans, people do, talk about it well, but it doesn't get the high praise of like one of the best episodes in the series. So it seems like to me that people seem to enjoy it, but they also they can't in their right mind call it a perfect example of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Now, as I get on with this review, I can understand why that is. And this definitely is an episode that very well could be underrated, or it could be justified why people feel the way they do, or maybe it might be worse than people make it out to be. But is this episode as good as I remember it? Is this a fun nostalgic episode? Can I take off my nostalgia goggles and look at it through a critical lens and see if this truly is a good episode of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Well, let's find out, shall we, as we delve into this episode. So let's take a look at this episode to see whether I think it's a good or bad episode of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Also, before we start the episode, I have just one more thing that I forgot to mention. So you guys may or may not know, but this is the only episode of Season 2 that doesn't have a chase song performed by Austin Roberts. I don't exactly know why. There's never been an answer on why Austin Roberts never performed a song for A Tiki Scare Is No Fair. I don't know if it was for personal reasons, or if they couldn't bother getting Roberts into the studio. I don't know if they couldn't come up with a song for the Hawaiian setting, so they didn't bother asking Roberts to come in. But there's never been a definitive answer on why Austin Roberts or any other singer wasn't brought in to perform a chase song for this episode, despite the fact that every other episode of season 2 has a chase song. So I just wanted to quickly mention that for any newcomers that don't know that piece of trivia. Anyways, let's get on with the review. The episode begins with Scooby and Shaggy enjoying their 47th luau, which is crazy. For those of you who don't know what a luau is, it basically is like a traditional Hawaiian party where you get to, where you get free Hawaiian food and you get to enjoy Hawaiian, culture. Basically like Hawaiian music or Hawaiian hula shows. So it's a pretty good cultural demonstration of the Hawaiian culture. And this is courtesy of John Sims, who is a local reporter giving them a tour of the Hawaiian Islands. Though Shaggy's not looking forward to tomorrow's destination, which is a haunted village in the mountains. Mr. Sims is taken aback by this, as he explained that it's not part of his tour, and he warns Shaggy against going up into it. But Shaggy tells him that the rest of the gang thought it up, and after he warns them that it's haunted, Shaggy and Scooby are like, we're not going there. And then just after that happens, just after he delivers this warning, ghost drums begin to beat, and then a frightening witch doctor appears and warns them and the locals to leave the sacred grounds of Mano Tiki Tia. This is probably the most intimidating the witch doctor ever gets. After this point, he's more of an entertaining, funny comedic villain. But this is definitely the most, shocking, grandiose presence of the witch doctor. Like, he actually is intimidating here when he delivers that warning. And despite Shaggy and Scooby saying later in the episode that John Sims was with them, which is going to be important later, Sims was not animated in the shot where the witch doctor appeared, so I don't know what the animators were thinking, but either Shaggy was wrong and didn't see right, or he was there and the animators forgot to animate it. But I'm inclined to think they just forgot to animate it, because clearly the animators intended for Sims, Shaggy, and Scooby to be in that shot. It's just they forgot to animate him for some reason. So after this warning, the villagers, Scooby, and Mr. Sims scatter everywhere, and Shaggy finds himself alone after he loses Scooby, the villagers, and Mr. Sims, and gets knocked over with poi all over him. And this is a pretty intense opening. This is probably the most intense opening. Like, it's all, fun, Shaggy and Scooby are enjoying themselves, and then it ramps up to 11, and a fucking witch doctor comes out of nowhere, and everybody's freaking out, and Shaggy can't find his best friend, his friendly tour guide, and these villagers. I think this is, like, the best opening of a Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode, because the thing that I like about it is that normally an opening of a Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode will either just set up the monster, like the monster might, appear, like the monster's presence, or the monster scares an unrelated person that doesn't show up at all throughout the rest of the episode. But in this one, Shaggy and Scooby are the first ones to see the monster right from the get-go. And it's actually cool to see them in an opening, since the gang usually aren't in openings like that. Usually openings are to set the mood, to get us going before we're introduced to the gang. So it was kind of a nice little change of pace. It's a great opening scene and a really good hook into the episode.
I'll bet the gang back at the Pineapple Parlor aren't having as much fun as we are. Ghost drums! Trespassers, hear me! You are on the forbidden ground of Mano Tiki Tia, vanished.
Shaggy races to a local hangout called the Pineapple Parlor, which is a nice substitute for the malt shop for the gang. So even when they're on vacation, the gang still are at their spiritual home. So that's good. They found a knockoff malt shop. And Shaggy finds Freddy and the girls in there and tells them about what happened with Scooby, Mr. Sims, and the natives. So Freddy and the girls decide to help Shaggy find where everybody is. And they return to the scene of the luau. And Velma spots an old man hurtled in a spot, by a statue. She says they should start looking by asking that old man, but Daphne says, "What old man?" And the old man vanishes, and they don't know, and Velma doesn't know what happened. So it kind of gives Velma a nice little moment of, did I just see what I think I saw? The gang finds Scooby also hiding inside a drum after a quick little chase with it because they think it's the ghost drum from earlier. And it's the first instance where Fred, Daphne, and Velma say Shaggy's catchphrase, Zoinks. I don't know why they say Shaggy's catchphrase, but it's not going to be the last time some member of the gang uses another member of the gang's catchphrase, as we'll see that, in a later episode of another show. But it's very odd, but it is what it is. I don't know why they don't just say their own catchphrases. So now, beginning their investigation of where Sims is, they look through all the footprints that are scattered around the ground, and they notice one set that has a set of footprints that seems to be dragging something, possibly a person or something else. So the gang decide to follow this set of footprints, and they find themselves at in the haunted village. After this, obviously there's some shenanigans in between with Shaggy and Scooby, with Shaggy acting as a dog for one point, that's how far he goes for a Scooby snack. And the gang are separated from each other by trapdoors. So Shaggy and Scooby are trapped outside, where they hear a noise, and it ends up being like a pack of boars, and they end up just chasing them, and Shaggy and Scooby end up being fine. Fred, Daphne, and Velma explore the inside, and Velma actually falls into another trap, which is actually a nice little bit of role reversal again, as instead of Daphne being the one that falls through the trapdoor, it ends up being Velma. And so Fred and Daphne explore more of it, wondering where everybody else is. And Velma gets a nice little scene where she sees Mr. Sims' hat on the table of the room she's in. She hides in like a pile of straw or hay, I don't know what you call it. And it showcases her allergies to it, which is brought up in a later show. And she can't keep her cover for long, so she eludes the witch doctor by sneezing the straw or hay onto him, and eluding him by hiding behind a statue. It's a nice little Velma chase scene. There's not many Velma chase scenes that I actually enjoy unless it's with Shaggy and Scooby, but it's a nice little scene for Velma. I enjoy it.
Wow. Oh no. It's Mr. Sims' hat. They've got him. But they're not gonna get me. Achoo!
Shaggy and Scooby then get chased by the second villain of the episode, and a very big and intimidating villain. Probably the first giant villain of the Scooby-Doo Warrior series, and I think the only one. And, giant villains are going to be ones that I favor a lot of, because they're really scary and intimidating, and Mono Tiki Tia is no different. He's a very intimidating presence when he's on screen. And they run away from Mono Tiki Tia and reunite with Velma when she pulls them aside behind, I don't know what you call it, like just a hiding place. And Velma and Shaggy and Scooby are like, we gotta evade that, that tall, statue or god or whatever you want to call it, that tiki, that big giant mono tiki tia. And Velma's like, not only him, but Scooby's like the witch doctor. And Velma's like, yeah, the witch doctor. How did you know? And I'm like, Velma, a scene earlier, Scooby and the rest of the gang got chased off by the witch doctor. How would he not know? I mean, it's pointed out that Scooby sees the witch doctor behind them. But Scooby saw the witch doctor earlier. I mean, of course he knows who it is. Like, they all would have known who the witch doctor is. Like, they don't remember they got chased by the witch doctor like a minute or two ago. That's how they got separated. But yeah, Shaggy, Scooby, and Velma are spotted and chased by the witch doctor. But they escape into the jungle thanks to a nice little role play that Velma gets to participate in, where Velma plays Jane, Shaggy plays Tarzan, and Scooby plays Cheetah the Chimp. It's very funny little role play, and I actually like that Velma gets to be in on the little, Shaggy and Scooby dress-up shenanigans. I think this is the first instance that Shaggy and Scooby do this, or at least like it's one of the more notable ones in the Scooby-Doo Where Are You series, as this would become a staple in later series of Shaggy and Scooby dressing up to fool the villain. And I like that Velma gets to play a part in that. It's pretty entertaining and pretty funny. They eventually find an airplane complete with a wire-activated skeleton that has been carefully rigged up to look like it's crashed. And rightfully, Shaggy gets fucking scared by the skeleton when he trips over it. And makes a nice joke about the skeleton. Shaggy's just on his A game in this episode. And so is Scooby and Velma. They're really the comedic trio on this episode, I gotta say that. Meanwhile, they manage to reunite with Freddy and Daphne, who earlier found oyster shells and pearls in one of the abandoned shacks they were investigating. And so after reuniting, they begin searching the area, continuing their search. And they spot the old man down in the lagoon, and they chase after him. There's an underwater chase that ends in a secret cavern leading back to the village. So back in the village, they encounter once again the giant stone statue of Mono Tiki Tia come to life, and of course the Hawaiian witch doctor. It's not known where the old man went. Who fucking knows where he went off to? And they chase the gang from shack to shack, and it not only is it a great chase scene, but we get to see Shaggy and Scooby once again do some nice role play and fuck with the witch doctor. I gotta say, this is probably the funniest scene in the episode. It's an entertaining chase scene, but it's also a very entertaining Shaggy and Scooby scene. Like, I just love, I love the added bonus of Shaggy and Scooby, like, fucking using that the revolving door to essentially play tricks on the Hawaiian witch doctor. It is hilarious.
What is that?
Wow! We certainly did, Scooby.
So they escape the the Hawaiian witch doctor and Monotikitia, and Shaggy and Scooby even give the witch doctor a good scare when they fall into the the bushes and become like this little tree, like bush, leaf monster, whatever you want to call it, and then get out of the jungle. This gives Freddy the idea of trapping the witch doctor. His plan is by using the ghost drums, which Shaggy and Scooby are going to play, and then they'll lure him to a place where he'll see his reflection in a funhouse mirror that they for some reason have in the Mystery Machine. What, did they take the funhouse mirror from Foul Play in Funland and they let him keep it? Which will scare him down a path and into a pit covered with palm leaves. So I'm guessing like Fred's idea is the ghost drums will track the witch doctor. The Hawaiian witch doctor will see his reflection, get scared, and fall into the pit. A lot of faith, considering the witch doctor is a little bit of a scaredy cat, like Shaggy and Scooby in this episode in certain scenes, but I don't know if he's that scared. So it's kind of questionable whether this trap would have actually worked. However, the plan, as always, ends up failing because the witch doctor finds Shaggy and Scooby playing the ghost drums, and in the ensuing chase scene, Shaggy and Scooby wind up on top of Monotikitia after being scared by, their own reflection, because Shaggy was wearing a kind of like a witch doctor type mask, similar to the witch doctor, and ended up, on top of Monotikitia, covering his eyes, blinding him, and then Monotikitia, presumably thinking the witch doctor is Hawaiian witch doctor is Shaggy and Scooby, picks up the Hawaiian witch doctor, catches the Hawaiian witch doctor and falls into the pit, which catches both of them. It's a nice little final trap scene. Fred had a good idea, but I think a lot of it was based on assumption. The witch doctor was a little bit of a scaredy cat, but I don't know whether he would have been that scared to fall for it. Regardless, the pit ended up working out because that tripped up the Monotikitia, and thankfully Monotikitia grabbed the Hawaiian witch doctor, so that that made things a lot easier. So it ended up all working out in the end, and it was a nice little final chase and trap scene. Shaggy and Scooby were kind of the bait, but I think they weren't really. I mean, their plan wasn't to be chased by the witch doctor. They were just attracting the witch doctor with ghost drums, because presumably the witch doctor would probably think where's these drums coming from, and think they're ghost drums. But it's a nice little final scene, final chase scene and trap scene to cap off the episode.
Hey, Scoob, pick up the beast. What you crying about? Another witch doctor! Hang on, Scoob! Well, what do you know? We got him!
Now for the unmasking. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Sims.
But what is a Mano-Tiki-Tia?
See, Shaggy, it's like a parade float operated by Mr. Sims' henchmen.
The witch doctor is exposed as John Sims. That's right, the gang's friendly tour guide ended up being the villain all along. kind of hurts too. He was pretty nice in the opening. It kind of sucks that he ended up being villain, but the clues were pointing towards him, so it's not too surprising. Even though the old man was definitely a very much red herring. And he was trying to scare the villagers away from his pearl poaching operation, which we'll get more into in the outro. And the old man appears, and he ends up really being a young police lieutenant working undercover, and is in gratitude for the gang's help that they've given him. Why he needed to dress up as an old man to scare the gang, I guess he did it so, he can investigate and, and get the gang off, get the gang away from that area. But he seemed to enjoy it too much, and at a certain point, maybe he didn't need to do that. I mean, the gang clearly showed that they were competent in, in solving this mystery. So I don't know why he kept this facade on. He clearly enjoyed scaring them too much. It was very odd. But anyway, the episode ends with the police lieutenant paying for one last luau for the gang, and we get a nice last scene of Scooby stealing Shaggy's poi from him, and they get their 48th luau. All right. I mean, if they had two more, Shaggy and Scooby would have like 50, and that'd be like a nice record already. But 48, man, Shaggy and Scooby's dedication is something to be admired for when it comes to food. They really were outdoing themselves in this episode, food-wise, even though we didn't see it. Shaggy really seemed to love poi, too. Him and Scooby. Scooby, but he really enjoyed poi. I think that was Shaggy's food. I'm going to give Season 2, Episode 6 of Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? 5 stars out of 5. So yeah, my opinion on this episode has not changed one bit. It is still very much a fantastic episode in my eyes, just like I was when I was younger. I can see why I love this episode, and I'll go into what I liked and disliked about it. Obviously, since it's a 5 out of 5, we'll start with the negatives, and I really only have 2 minor ones, and they don't even really bug me, if I'm being honest. The first one is like the lack of suspects. So there's only 2 suspects in the episode. You have John Sims and the old guy who ends up being the police lieutenant. The problem is that because there's 2 villains, it kind of destroys a little bit of it kind of downgrades the mystery a little bit, because it's going to be there's no mystery, because you're like, okay, there's 2 villains, there's 2 guys here, it could probably be 2 of them. It ends up not being both of them. It ends up being like a no-name suspect, ends up being, Monotiki Tia, while Sims is the Hawaiian witch doctor. But a suspect or 2 more probably would have made it a little bit better. It's still good as it is. Don't get me wrong. They do the best they can with with making this episode question who the witch doctor is. Not necessarily Monotiki Tia. They don't really try to play up who is Monotiki Tia. They more play on to who's the Hawaiian witch doctor, really. Which is cool, but that does ignore the second half of the villain department. So, maybe another suspect or 2 definitely would have helped iron out the mystery a little bit and made it much more perfect, but still is good nonetheless. Still is fantastic. Just a little touch like that would have made it amazing. And the second and final minor negative is 2 parts of Monotiki Tia's villain persona. The villain persona of Monotiki Tia is hurt by having wheels on the bottom. So by Monotiki Tia having wheels, you can hear the wheels, you can see the wheels, it kind of destroys the facade a little bit of it being a real monster or a real ghost. And I've made this clear. I don't like real monsters in Scooby-Doo. I don't like real supernatural shit. I'm not into that type of thing with Scooby-Doo. I prefer a man behind the mask thing. So I'm not asking it be real. What I'm asking is that I like having wheels kind of destroys the perception of it being real a little bit. I like the perception of of the man behind the mask being possibly a real monster, but it ends up not being a real one. It does destroy the perception of the villain persona a little bit by having wheels, and you question how the gang can't hear that and think, well, this is obviously a man behind the mask. And also, it does hurt a little bit by Monotiki Tia being, it being a no-name suspect behind Monotiki Tia. It ends up being just a hired henchman of John Sims, and that kind of sucks, because I don't really like no-name suspects, but I can forgive it in this episode because it's not, like I said, I think it's when a police officer has to come in and tell the gang who the suspect is. I still don't like the no-name suspect. I still don't like because it does, ruin that, ruin your chances of guessing that guy. Because if that guy had been there, not only would that have fixed the issue of the no-name suspect, but it also would have fixed the issue of the lack of suspects. So it would have made it that much more amazing. But by making him a no-name suspect and not including him in the episode until the end, it hurts both the lack of suspects and, and him as a character, because we can't guess him. But again, this is just minor stuff that really, that they could have ironed out to make Monotiki Tia a really fantastic villain. Monotiki Tia is still a good villain in this episode. It's just those two elements make it, a little bit not perfect. They're just minor negatives that just inch it away from being perfect. But it's still a fantastic 5 out of 5. It's just not a perfect, nothing, no negatives 5 out of 5. And it's hard to get one of those in an episode. But it's clear that they could have fixed some of these issues by, maybe, just tweaking a few things here and there. But it doesn't hurt my perception of the episode overall. These are just minor gripes that I just found in the episode that could have been tweaked a little bit to make it that much more perfect. But it's still a fantastic episode nonetheless. And I'm going to get into the positives on why I think this episode is amazing. So let's get into it. So now for the positives. First, we'll start with the gang. The gang were great in this episode. I loved seeing them go on vacation to Hawaii. Just a group of teenagers going on vacation to Hawaii, having a fun time. Really sounds like an awesome idea for the gang. We don't really see the gang. This is the first time we see the gang in Hawaii. And it's a very nice change of pace. And it's cool just to see the gang go on vacation. I mean, there's been hints of that in certain other episodes where they drive out of their way to certain events. But in this episode, they're not at home. They're on vacation and, enjoying themselves. Because obviously, it's clear that they don't live in Hawaii. It's been established that they're in Coolsville, is somewhere in Ohio. So it's clear that this isn't their hometown. But and it's nice to see them, go on vacation and be in a different setting and, have a different type of mystery from the norm. So starting with Fred was pretty good in this episode. He was not only a good leader in this episode and really drove forward, trying to find everybody and, solve the mystery, but he also did a good job helping piece together the mystery. And I know he does do that a little, do that as well in other episodes with Velma. But Fred very much pieces together everything in this episode. More than Velma. And I'll get into that. Fred very much was the guy who solved this mystery more than Velma. Velma had some moments, but she didn't really solve this one. Fred was definitely on his A game as far as leadership and solving this mystery. He was on top form when it came to, getting this mystery solved, finding all the clues, and taking charge on this mystery and finding everybody. He was great in this episode. Really no complaints for Fred. He was utilized perfectly. Daphne helped a little bit by finding one of the clues with Fred in the shack when they investigated and found the pearls and the oysters. So they found out the motive. Daphne and Velma also did find the newspaper of John Sims investigating the Monotiki Tia and the haunted village and all that. which helped point towards Sims, being a villain since he was an investigative reporter and was investigating the village. So Daphne did help find it, and I also think that Daphne, I don't really mention this a lot because it's very, Fred and Daphne, always are together a lot. But I feel like in this episode, Fred and Daphne really had some great chemistry in this episode. I feel like they were a great team in this episode as far as, helping piece together the mystery, finding, the clues, and, finding everybody, and help and finding out where everybody is and, what's going on. I feel like Fred and Daphne's dynamic was great in this episode, and they really carried the load when it came to the mysteries and the clues, and all that stuff. Obviously, Fred did most of it, but Daphne did help play a little bit of a part, and she did have great chemistry with Fred. Like, they were really, they clicked well together. Like, I feel like compared to other episodes where, Fred and Daphne obviously always have good chemistry, but I feel like in this one it was much more different. It stood out a little more than in previous episodes. And Fred and Daphne's not, a relationship that I really, love like Velma and Shaggy's, so I don't really point it out as much. But I feel like in this one, because they executed it so well, and made it pretty, and did a pretty good job with it, and did something unique with it, because they were doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this episode. I very much, feel like I should highlight that and say, yeah, Daphne had great chemistry with Fred in this episode, and they were a great duo as far as, solving the mysteries, finding the clues, and, taking charge on finding out what happened to Mr. Sims, the natives, and Scooby-Doo. Now on to Velma. Velma was very different in this episode. She wasn't her really clue-solving self. She found the newspaper, and she pointed out how Mono Tiki Tio was a parade float once they captured him. But other than that, Velma didn't really piece together. I mean, she obviously knew that the plane was fake and set up. But, she only had sporadic moments like that. She didn't really piece together the mystery like Fred and Daphne did. Especially Fred. Like, I feel like Fred took the role of clue solver, helping to piece together the mystery and being the leader in this episode. Whereas Velma was definitely a lot different. Now, don't get me wrong, like, it wasn't a bad thing. Velma actually got to do something out of her norm that she normally doesn't do, and that was being very funny and entertaining in this episode. She once again had great chemistry with Shaggy and Scooby, just like in the Caveman episode. They were a great, trio. I mean, they were in the last episode. I know I keep bringing that up, but I have to keep bringing it up because it's so amazing, and I like highlighting Velma and Shaggy's relationship to show people, yeah, there were hints that Velma and Shaggy were a couple in the original series, or at least had, hints of, liking each other, because people like to deny that when it isn't true. It's very much implied in this early show, and it's very obvious that they're very much like, a duo, a couple. And so they were all great trio in this episode, and I wouldn't say they were useless. Like, yeah, Fred and Daphne did a lot of heavy lifting, but they kind of helped capture the villain. They found some fake props. Velma found the newspaper, and they found the village too. So Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby weren't necessarily useless. They just didn't do a lot of the heavy lifting like Fred and Daphne did, but they did enough and played, the comedy role. Usually that's for Shaggy and Scooby, but Velma enhanced that as, did that as well. Velma was very funny in this episode, not both by herself and with Shaggy and Scooby. It was nice seeing Velma being more funny, entertaining character rather than, the know-it-all, smart, character trying to piece everything together. I like seeing that aspect of her, but in this episode I like the change of pace of just having her be funny, having her goof around with Shaggy and Scooby in this episode. It's not like they didn't do anything useful, it's not like they were useless and they didn't do anything useful. They did, just not as much as Friend Daphne. And then we come to my favorite dynamic duo, Shaggy and Scooby themselves, the comedic duo. Once again, they were both very funny in this episode. The comedy was on point with these two, as well as Velma. Again, they had great chemistry with Velma, and like I mentioned in the review, I liked the opening of the episode, which was a nice shake-up from the opening, being like I said, being like a setup for the villain, or having a nobody being scared by the villain who doesn't show up at all throughout the rest of the episode. Instead, Shaggy and Scooby get to first encounter the villain right in its first appearance, and kind of set up the mystery from there. And it was such a fantastic opening, and it really was amazing because it was both shocking and, surprising that how grandiose the Witch Doctor's entrance was. I really liked that change of pace, and it was a nice, shake-up in this episode. So, overall, like, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby were great on the comedy front, and they helped capture the villain, and they found, like, clues and figured out what wasn't real. And Shaggy did find the secret cavern. Like, he was the one that kind of led towards it. Towards following the old man. So they did help out a little bit, but like I said, not as much as Friend Daphne. But that's not a bad thing. They still did a part, and that's all I'm asking for. As long as they're used well, that doesn't bother me. The mystery was great in this episode. I love the hook of what happened to the natives, John Sims, and most importantly, the titular mascot, Scooby-Doo. That's a great hook for the episode. Shaggy's all alone. He doesn't know where the natives that he was hanging out with are. He doesn't know where his friendly tour guide is. And he doesn't know where his best friend is. That's an amazing hook to get started on the mystery, and it only goes up from there. Even when they find Scooby, trying to find John Sims, thinking that something happened to him, and he was such a friendly guy in the beginning that you wouldn't suspect him much as a villain, but he really did a good job of kind of fooling the audience a little bit. But it seemed like he was a very friendly guy towards the gang, and that they hung out with him for a while before this whole before this mystery began. But the mystery was fantastic, really was a great hook. I was intrigued from frame one. I was invested. The clues were great too, because they helped point towards the suspect and the motive. Finding the newspaper helped point towards John Sims, because it showed that he was investigating the area beforehand. So it shows that if somebody maybe had their critical thinking, they're going to be like, okay, he's an investigative reporter. He's saying that this place is haunted. He could have possibly found something, and maybe he's pulling a ruse and, doesn't want people to know about it. So John Sims was very much, the clue helped point towards that. And the pearls help, figure out what the motive of the villain was and what he was hiding. So the clues were done well. They help point towards John Sims as a suspect, and they help point towards his motive on why he was doing what he was doing, which is what clues should do. Then we move on to the villains. The villains were great in this episode too. We'll start with the Hawaiian Witch Doctor first, since he's mainly the primary villain of the episode and is really the focus. The Hawaiian Witch Doctor was very entertaining and funny. He wasn't necessarily scary to me. Like, nothing about him was scary, other than his first appearance when he made his grandiose appearance. That was a little bit, out of left field, and that was a great hook. He definitely was good in that. But I also think he had a little uneasiness due to the number of skulls placed around the village. He had a skull, staff with him. And he was very unsettling and intimidating when he made his appearance in the beginning of the episode. So he was very good in this episode. He wasn't he was scary in a different way. Like, he made you feel a little uneasy, a little unsettled. Like, you didn't feel quite safe, but you weren't scared of him. You didn't. There was no threat factor to him. He just was a little intimidating at the beginning when he made his appearance because of how he did his warning. And then he was also a little bit intimidating and uneasy when you saw the area he was occupying in this haunted village, because there were skulls everywhere, and skeletons. So it created an uneasy and unsettling atmosphere in the episode. And outside of the costume, like I said, I like John Sims in this episode. I think he was great because he told the story of a haunted village, because he was an investigative reporter, reporting on, investigating it. And he was also a friendly tour guide to the gang and showed them around Hawaii. Presumably, he was the one he probably was there when they first landed, and who offered to show the gang around Hawaii. So it's kind of a little bit personal, a little bit, to the gang, that the man that they were hanging out with for God knows how long, probably for a couple days, ended up being a villain, a baddie. And he, especially when he was very friendly towards the beginning, and he and the gang obviously cared about his safety and wanted to find out where he was. So he was a very good villain because he had good deception. He did a good job of covering his operation for a while and keeping the facade of being a friendly tour guide to the gang, until the end, when he obviously says, "I'm not talking," and is pissed at the gang for finding out what he did. But yeah, I really like John Sims. He was great out of costume. And then you have Mano Tikitia, the second villain of the episode, and really not the primary one that the episode tries to focus on, but does get enough screen time that he is a villain. So Mano Tikitia is sort of different. He's a little more intimidating due to his size, and like I said, even though he's hurt a little bit by having the wheels and it being a no-name suspect, his size alone really makes up for that, because a giant villain in Scooby-Doo, those are going to be A+ in my book. Very rarely am I probably ever going to give, say like a big monster villain is not going to be high on my list, because when a monster is big, you already won me there, because I would be fucking scared at anything the size of a building chasing after me. Fuck that. I don't want to be chased by that thing. And yeah, like I said, the wheels made it obvious it wasn't real. It hurt his persona a little bit. But if you ignore that, he is pretty intimidating with, the way he growls and how he moves, he chases after them so many times. I wouldn't want to be catched by this dude. Fuck that. This god is not fucking around, and I don't want to be anywhere near him. Then you have the villain's motive for the episode. So both villains' motive was unique and interesting. I really loved the unique motive, which was they scared people away from the village, from their pearl poaching operation. They found these pearls and oysters in that cavern and were poaching them, and obviously, probably selling them for money, but it was unique to the setting, because this is something I could probably see in somewhere in Hawaii, somebody doing this type of shit, and it's a nice change of pace. It's something we haven't seen before, and I like the change in motive, and it's a little fresh. It's not stale. It's not something we haven't seen before. They don't directly say that he's doing it because of money, but obviously it is. I mean, you could sell these pearls probably to trade in for cash, but that's okay, because a money motive isn't bad if you make it unique enough, and in this case it is, because the pearl poaching operation was really unique and interesting and something new we hadn't seen before. So I thought the motive was fantastic in this episode. And finally, You have the atmosphere and setting. And the atmosphere and setting were both great in this episode. So we'll start with the atmosphere. I thought the atmosphere was very unsettling and uneasy due to the skulls placed around the village. And, the way the witch doctor presented himself in the beginning. The size of Monotiki Tia. Everything around the village, had that spooky atmosphere. And the setting only enhanced that because the setting was unique and different. It was something new we hadn't seen yet in Scooby-Doo, and that was putting the gang in a mystery in Hawaii. That's a nice idea, and it was executed well. The setting was unique due to it being set in Hawaii because of the duality of, being in Hawaii. It was great because at one point you had, this fun vacation vibes. Everything's going well. We're having a good time. We're attending, these luau's. We're at this, pineapple parlor having a good time. This friendly tour guide is taking us to all these famous areas in Hawaii. And then in the next moment, and at another point, it can be dark with a sense of unease and unsettlingness when the witch doctor appears and makes his appearance, and they find the haunted village with all these skulls and skeletons everywhere. And Monotiki Tia, the god that the witch doctor warned about, begins to chase them and ward them off, and with his huge size, and it's crazy. The duality of the setting was fantastic, because Hawaii, you think like a fun vacation setting, but they somehow made Hawaii, an uneasy and unsettling atmosphere and, setting. They did a good job of adding some dark elements to Hawaii and not showing it as all sunshine and rainbows and making it all bright and colory. It was dark throughout the whole thing. Even when the volcano, made the sky red and everything. That was cool too. They did a good job of making the episode feel more dark rather than, light, happy Hawaii vibes. They tried to make Hawaii a little bit more dark, and I like the effort they put into it. They did a good job doing the duality of it, because even when it wasn't light, even though it was never light out, they still had those fun vacation vibes in it. As if it was like a normal night, but they also had the dark, unsettling, uneasy moments as well, and both in the atmosphere and setting. So that was great. Overall, guys, I would recommend this episode to fans and newcomers of the show. It's an easy recommend. It is a rewatchable episode that has a lot of fun that I can always go back to. It also has a sense of uneasiness and unsettlement due to the dark elements in the episode. So it's not completely devoid of darkness. It's just not that dark. And people might write it off as cheesy fun. I disagree completely. It's a fun episode that has dark elements in it, and it's not the scariest episode in the world, but it doesn't have to be. I don't need something to be the scariest thing in the world for it to be amazing. I like scary episodes, but what they did was great because they made it not only a fun adventure mystery that in Hawaii, but they also added dark, unsettling, uneasy elements in this episode to make it, still a little bit scary, still make you feel uneasy and, not be 100% safe. You're not just watching the episode being like, oh, the gangs are going to be okay, there's nothing wrong, it's just fun Hawaii vibes, it's just a goofy, funny Hawaii episode. No, there is a sense of danger in this episode, and they do show that well. So as long as they have that, it doesn't matter how high you do it. It can be the highest, like the Headless Spectre, and make it completely scary, or it could be just low danger. Any kind of danger is great as long as you present it well. As long as those dark elements are there, that's what makes it, still good. It's an easy rewatch. It's the one episode I could easily go back to. It's easily dethroned episode 1 for me. We finally reached an episode that has beaten episode 1 as my favorite, and it's probably not just probably due to a little bit of nostalgia, but I generally do think that, you know, even when I looked at it through my critical lens, I still thought it was a really good episode. So I don't have any regrets. I love this episode. It's underrated. It deserves more love. It's a fantastic episode. Please go watch it if you haven't given it a chance. You might be genuinely surprised. You might dismiss it as, you know, comedy fun, but you should expect comedy in Scooby-Doo. Now, it might not be your cup of tea if you're looking for a scary episode, but I still would recommend it just to give it a shot and see if it's for you, because it's an underrated episode that shouldn't be written off just because it's a little more fun than the others. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? If you do, please, you know, share the love. Let's get this discussion going. Let's talk about how great this episode is, because this is a fun episode that deserves a lot of love, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, and we can, you know, spread the love around for this episode and get people, you know, on board with the Tiki Scares No Fair train, and, you know, maybe make people appreciate this episode more and talk about it more. Do you hate this episode? I also would be interested to hear that. If this isn't your kind of episode, please tell me why this episode doesn't gel with you. I'd be happy to hear it. If you got some good reasons, or are you somewhere in the middle where you don't think it's an amazing episode, but you don't think it's the worst thing in the world? That's fine too. I would disagree completely, but I still would be interested in hearing it. This is definitely, though, a fantastic episode that is underrated and deserves a lot more love and fans really should give it more attention. It's a fantastic episode. And subscribe for more Scooby-Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content. As per usual, I will, of course, be continuing more Scooby-Doo for the rest of the summer, you know, rest of this month. And then I'll review some Scooby-Doo episodes for Scooby Month, which is dedicated all to Scooby-Doo, because my goal is to review everything Scooby-Doo. I'm not leaving anything on the table. I'm a Scooby-Doo fanatic. I'm a hardcore Scooby-Doo fan. I want to review every single piece of Scooby-Doo media, and the TV shows are a great start. So if you want to see me review more Scooby-Doo TV show episodes, not just of this show, but other shows, please stay tuned, because we'll not only have more this month, but also next month as well. But if you're interested in anything else, it'll be a little bit before something new comes along besides Scooby-Doo, but probably in October, maybe November, you can expect some variety a little bit. But mainly I'm focusing on Scooby-Doo, and I'm fine with that. I love Scooby-Doo. I love talking about it, so I'm okay with sticking with Scooby-Doo. You can also follow me on Facebook, where I have discussions about things we talk about on both my channels, and Twitch, where I hope to live stream in the future. So in my next video, I will continue my 2023 summer special with a review of Season 2, Episode 7 of Scooby-Doo Where Are You? Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Werewolf? From what I've gathered, this episode has conflicting opinions, but mostly negative ones I've heard, so is it going to be a downgrade compared to this one? Are we going to find another dud? Let's hope not. Let's hope it's a good episode. But we'll find out in the next one. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on whether you think whether I think it's a good or bad episode, then stay tuned, because that episode will be next. Thanks for watching, and as always, peace out.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We got some work to do now. Scooby-Dooby-Doo, where are you? We need some help from you now. Come on, Scooby-Doo, I see you, pretending you got a sliver. You're not fooling me, 'cause I can see the way you shake and shiver.